Hey, what's up to all you filmmakers out there? This is filmmaker Ron K. Armstrong, filmmaker extraordinaire, with another video for you. And in this video, I want to talk about the state of Black films in Hollywood. But before I do that, I want you to hit the like button on this video. This is your first time to my channel. Welcome. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications on when I go live and when I upload recorded videos. So I came on because I wanted to have a candid conversation about what's happening in Hollywood in regards to Black filmmakers, Black films, Black actors, Black screenwriters, the whole gamut. Because I don't think that we're having a real good discussion about this in terms of where things are going. Now, previously, we can look back to the 80s, 90s, and we can see patterns and waves in terms of the trends. There was at one point where we saw that the trend was these ghetto hood films like Menace to Society, Boys in the Hood. And even before that, we had like the B-box films, like a Crush Groove and things of that nature. So we've gone through these different waves, and we're seeing now, because of the pandemic, things are changing and having to adapt, specifically Hollywood. And just to kind of surmise what's happening in the industry, Hollywood was in a phase of where they were acquiring IPs or scripts. And they went and they acquired all of these scripts, lo and behold, to find out that they're not going into production, because the expectation at the time was that this whole thing would be over and that they would be back to business as normal. But now we're seeing with major theater chains, some like AMC, are going out of business. So there's no place or no theatrical distribution. So everything's now turning to online platforms, like your Amazon, your HBO, your Disney Plus. And because that the studios are forced to put their major tentpole films on these platforms, it's dramatically going to change ways that they do business. For example, they're no longer, I believe, or for the short term, going to be spending a lot of money on films. I mean, when you look at Titanic, what was that, a $200-300 million film? I think Hollywood's going to be reluctant to do that, because you're not going to get that type of return off streaming platforms. That's just the fact of the matter. So Hollywood's going to be investing in a little bit films with not as exorbitant budgets as they used to be. Not only that, but producing less films, because the industry has laid off a bunch of people. And we don't actually see the economy bouncing back quickly or anytime soon. In fact, many industries that have been forced to shut down, or businesses that have been forced to shut down, they have predicted they won't be returning. So this means that the film industry needs to adapt to a whole new paradigm, a whole new structure. And that is, again, producing less films, producing films with not so much of an exorbitant budget, and using online platforms to showcase those films. Now, the thing that we're not really seeing, and that's kind of interesting, is how these are affecting this change is affecting Black films. Now, I talked about earlier the trends, how we saw that, in the 90s, Hollywood was actively seeking out independent filmmakers, because they were tired of paying large fees to actors like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they could get these films like Super Size Me or whatever, or the independent films by Steven Soderbergh. They could pick those up, give them distribution deals, and make a good return off of those things. So what we have failed to take a look at is how compartmentalized Black filmmakers and Black films are, and how stigmatized they are. You see, we are not in that age anymore of your Boys in the Hood or your Menace to Society films, but now we're in the musical biopic era, where every film Hollywood wants to produce is about New Edition, Salt and Pepper. It's the same thing, just being redone. Stevie Wonder or Ray Charles films or whatever. Or if it's not that, it's about the 60s civil rights era. Or if it's not that, it's about slavery, like in Harriet Tubman, story of Harriet Tubman, or 12 Years a Slave. And what you see is that what you think is progress is not necessarily so, because we're stigmatized, we're looked upon in just one way, and that is either through the lens of musical biopic, or your sports figures, or your music industry, or civil rights, slavery. And we're not getting the opportunity to produce films like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, things of that nature. Yes, we had Black Panther, but that was one film that was of a sci-fi nature, whereas Hollywood has yet to produce any more films similar to that, where it's mostly a Black cast, you know. But the point I'm trying to make is, if you, it's interesting because the director, his name escapes me at the moment. A director came out, and maybe his name didn't escape me. Maybe I just don't want to say his name. He's done some of the films I've actually loved throughout the years. But he came out speaking against Black Panther, talking about how it was nothing but fantasy. And I guess someone forgot to tell him that he produces films of fantasy. But it was interesting, his reaction, which is a very racist reaction, and he has had in the past with his films specifically, Brazil and, other Time Bandits, you'll know the director I'm talking about. He has come under racist attacks or racist criticism, I should say, because he has said some very overtly racist stuff in the past. But it was interesting what he said about the Black Panthers, because the lack of films of that nature make the Black Panther seem like an oddity, seem unrealistic in a way, because the global audience is not used to seeing Black people in sci-fi, in fantasy, in mystery, in horror. And I'm talking about a full Black cast here. So when something like Black Panther comes along, it's inconceivable, as the Princess Bride, they say. And it's hard for white people to conceptualize and accept, as in the case of Star Wars, where you had the first trailer when Finn was a stormtrooper. It was perplexing to many people. They couldn't accept that. So what this tells us is that the nature of Black films, that niche, has not expanded beyond the musical biopics, the sports, the music, to really make progress and to tackle a diversity of subject matters, and we celebrate every time there is a musical biopic, or there is a civil rights film, or a slave film, but we have not stood up to demand diversity in terms of subject matter and genre in Hollywood. We haven't. I think it's because we're so happy with the crumbs being thrown our way. We don't want to rock the boat. But this creates a very, very serious problem, because now that you have Hollywood responding to the crisis, this global situation, you're going to have Black films now, which were marginalized in the first place, are going to be put more on the peripheral. And then they're going to be stigmatized even more in the way of the biopics and the civil rights era. And it's going to be harder for us to break out of that, to tell really, really interesting stories, and for Black screenwriters to write scripts that are of an adventure, sci-fi, fantasy nature. And right now, you do have your Black filmmakers who are doing it, Black screenwriters, but they know that there's no studio that's going to produce that, because the studios right now are risk adverse. They're going to be doing what works, which is why you have Disney taking Star Wars and branching it out into so many different types of cells, so they can profit off of it. But that's not what you're going to see with Black films, because it's always going to be just in that compartmentalized, and it won't be allowed to go outside of those parameters. And recently they were talking about how China, which is used to be one of the biggest markets for Hollywood, is racist. They don't like seeing black people in films. Well, that gives Hollywood an excuse to cut back on black films and financing them, especially when they're not in the norm, as some would say. So I want us to really start thinking about that, because we're in a very tricky situation right now. Because if Hollywood's going to scale back on their budgets to make a return off of streaming platforms, black films from the initial start weren't given a lot of money. So what are you going to see now? Even more of a scaling down with black films, you know? So this is something we have to just keep in mind. You know, I know Spike's recent film, which I did like, you know, when and it wasn't without problems, you know, but I do like Spike's films. But it premiered online, and I'm specifically talking about the Five Bloods. But you can see that the budget for that film was very small, you know, and I'm wondering if we want to tell stories like that. And Delroy Lindo gave an excellent performance in that film, by the way. But if we want to tell stories like that, which are not in the norm, are we going to be given an adequate budget to do that, or will they even get greenlit in the first place? These are questions that we're going to have to ask and start looking at, because again, when Hollywood feels the pinch, black filmmakers are going to feel it even more, and black films are going to feel it even more. And they're always going to have, just to let you know, their tokens and their favorites to put up there to make you seem that the progress is happening, you know. And you just have to be aware of that because you're seeing these token individuals make big budget films doesn't mean that there's progress, you know. And you know, I love Will Smith, and he can make all the films he wants, and I'll go see him. I love his films, but I'm under no illusion that if Will Smith's films make bank at the box office, that's going to help black filmmakers. I don't think it is. You know what I mean? It's not. So we just have to be aware of that when we're seeing these individuals come along and do very well, that doesn't mean that that's going to translate into black filmmakers being able to break into the industry and produce films of a very diverse nature. It doesn't mean that. So let's be aware of that. And the same with great filmmakers like Spike Lee. When you have the Five Bloods and it does well, or that doesn't necessarily translate into the fact that it'll really change the sentiment in Hollywood and how they see black filmmakers. Because right now Hollywood has an agenda, to be candid with you. They're going through this whole identity politics thing, this SJW thing that they're injecting in their films. And when it comes to black films, they're going to do that to the umpteenth degree. And they want to program and condition Black America to be major consumers, in a way, to be emotional, and to think only in terms of music and sports and civil rights. I've yet to see great films of black inventors like Benjamin Banneker, Lewis Lattimore. You know, I mean, where are these films? We haven't seen them. So will they even come to pass in the future? Well, maybe not, because again, Hollywood's risk averse, and they're going to stay with what works, and they're going to milk a franchise for all it's worth. You know, if for example, if Dune is successful, you can probably see, based on the Marvel success, how they're going to try and spin Dune off into different branches and different stories and try to tie them all back. which is what they are trying to do with Star Wars, and which Marvel was successful in doing with the Avengers. What they're successful in doing with the Avengers. So we're going to see that they're going to take these franchises and just really just milk them, because they know there's a built-in audience for those. And on the same token, they know that with these musical biopics, when you're doing a biopic of Salt and Pepper or New Edition, there's a built-in audience for that. So you can keep doing it. Who else do we do? Let's do Kid and Play next. Let's do I don't know who, Kumo D, Fat Joe, or whatever. They know there's an audience for that, so they're going to keep doing it. But it's really nothing that nourishes and helps further the Black film industry. It's really not, so we just need to think about that, and to really just look at what's going on in Hollywood and saying, as an indie filmmaker, as an indie producer, how can I leverage this situation, this crisis, to my benefit? Because Hollywood is not going to, what I see now is Hollywood is going to be more for the elite, more for the established, because they are not going to willingly just open the door for new talent unless you are two criteria: unless you are exceptionally talented and your film comes out there and make waves, or unless you can fit their political agenda, their identity politics. If you can fit within those two boxes, then they'll work with you. But that's going to be very, very challenging, And if you're okay playing that whole identity politics and you fit in with that, then go for it. If that's what you want to do, the harder part is paving a way for yourself to be an innovator and to come out with a film that gets Hollywood's attention. Because Hollywood, if it doesn't fit within their agenda, they try to ignore it, or vilify it. There were some great films that Hollywood, because Hollywood wanted to vilify the filmmaker or the subject matter, they tried to ignore and put out negative press about it, So I don't want to go into too much into any names or anything like that, but that's the case, If your ideology or something you say goes against identity politics or the SJW agenda, they try to destroy you and vilify you. And we can see many examples of this, many examples of this. This is why people are very careful and conscious of what they say publicly now, because they don't want accusations or people coming out of the woodworks 20 years later to say, oh, I met you at a bar and you said this. And now all of a sudden they rally their supporters to destroy your career. You know what I mean? So anyway, just keep that in mind. And if you are interested in learning more about the industry and really trying to find a way to break in, because right now it's even more challenges, I would say just check out my program, The Secret Movie Deal. This really goes into a lot of good information on breaking in, making contacts, and how do you just fight your way in and get your way in using very, very cool cutting edge techniques to get noticed and to make the right contacts within the industry. So it's a program that's really well worth it. It's going to give you some excellent insight as to how to beat the system. You know what I mean? So anyway, I want to thank you for tuning in, and I hope this really gets you to think and look at things in a different way. I think we have to stop doing business as normal, meaning stop ignoring the problem. There's a problem here now. There's a situation here now. And nobody's the expert on dealing with this. Even Hollywood's trying to figure out how this is going to work. You know what I mean? But the thing is, I think at least Hollywood is working on a solution and working on the problem. What I see now with Black filmmakers is that they're not even consciously aware of the problem or the situation that's coming at them. It's like a bullet train. It's going to hit you head on. And if we're not cognizant of the situation, we're going to get caught in, well, let's say it this way. If we're not taking proactive measures, the progress that we have made in the last decades is going to be pulled back. And the excuses that Hollywood can come up with is, oh, well, theater chains are gone, China's racist, but it is all excuses, So, I mean, at the heart of that, there's a bit of truth, but that's going to be Hollywood's justification for not coming up with more diverse films or not making more Black films or minority films. So we just need to start looking at this and saying, here's an issue. How can we leverage this to our advantage? How can we come together to pave the way? Because what you're going to see is the established order. Those filmmakers who are established out there now are going to cement their position. And the door, which was once cracked, is now going to close and lock for any new talent. And you're going to see this recycling of talent over and over again. Denzel Washington, your Will Smith, you know what I mean? The Rock, over and over again. That's what you're going to see. And we're not going to see the new, fresh talent that's going to be able to be pulled in. And that's going to be problematic because we need that. We need that breath of fresh air. The one good note that I'd like to point out is Nigeria. The Nigeria film industry is really, I think they're taking off, and I think they also, as far as if you want to say African filmmakers or Black filmmakers, they've really come out with a diverse array of films. Diversity is kind of like what they are focusing on. I've seen really great science fiction films come from them, fantasy films come from them, love stories. So they are not stigmatizing themselves or staying within a box or staying within the box. They are trying to break out and do an array of different types of film, albeit they don't have the budget that what we have here in the West, but they're really trying to make their mark and do something extraordinarily different and interesting on a low budget. So if you watch some of their films, I mean, they do martial arts films, Matrix types films. They do a lot of great stuff. And I hope that market keeps improving, keeps getting financing, and really becomes a competitor. It is already a competitor with Hollywood and Nollywood. Bollywood. I'm sorry, Bollywood, the India's film industry. So I hope it keeps growing strong because it could teach us here in the United States a lesson in terms of we need to produce a diverse array of content. And this starts with independent filmmakers. We need to start producing more diversity in terms of the films. And you can't use the excuse of budget because, again, Nollywood, Nigerian film market, they have almost zero budget, yet they're producing some really cool effects and they're taking things to the next level. So we need to look to them and say they're kind of like an inspiration for us all, So keep that in mind. Anyway, thank you for tuning in to this candid discussion. This is Ron K. Armstrong, filmmaker extraordinaire. And until my next broadcast, keep making films.